The hype train is full steam ahead for the Nintendo Switch 2. Some like it, some love it, some hate it. There's always some haters out there. It looks like it's going to be pretty cool. But we want to take just a moment to appreciate how amazing the original Nintendo Switch was, probably will continue to be with the collectability. We got to remember, this console came out on the heels of one of the most disappointing console releases of all time for Nintendo with the Wii U. So confidence in the brand was maybe at a low.
It was a little low.
Nintendo's grasping at straws, releasing mini consoles, the Mini NES, the Mini SNES, which are great in their own right, but just to keep the thing afloat until the Switch came along, nobody knew what was going to happen, and the thing has freaking delivered.
Yeah, the freaking Switch blew up. It is now, I think, the third best-selling video game console of all time, and I think in the United States, it is the best-selling video game console of all time. It's sniffing at the heels of the PS2.
Yeah, and it's still selling units,
It's still selling units, so it could pass the PS2, and the PS2 was in production for double-digits years. I think like 11 years maybe, and the Switch has been like, what, 9, 10 maybe?
I don't even know.
I don't know the exact years, but the Switch is doing so freaking well, and it's doing it all on its own for the most part, which is so amazing.
Yeah, there's something that doesn't maybe get acknowledged as much that is a fascinating thing to me. So when people will talk about like why the Dreamcast failed or things like that, it comes up a lot of times about third-party support.
Yes.
And albeit the Switch has great third-party support, we got to keep in mind that this console, underpowered compared to the other consoles on the market that it's going against, at least right now, and it has not had a Call of Duty or a Madden that are your perennial, like, top-selling video games, and it doesn't even have those, and it's still able to just rock and roll.
That's what's so insane is Nintendo's doing their own thing. Obviously, there is third-party support by other companies, but most consoles, Microsoft and PlayStation, they need those Maddens, they need those Call of Duties, because that's what pushes units, that's what pushes sales. And if you look at the sales status for Maddens and Call of Duties, it's always like the best-selling video games of that year.
Yep.
They're selling so many amounts of units of those games, and the Switch is like, we're not going to touch it, and we'll still be one of the best-selling consoles. That is absolutely insane, because that stuff wasn't on the Dreamcast, and that's why a lot of people say it failed, because it didn't have the Maddens or the Call of Duties or all that stuff. And it's like, it was a different time, but it's just so impressive that Nintendo is just like, no, we're just going to do our own thing. You know, you can play Madden, you can play Call of Duty, or you could buy Smash Bros.
Yeah.
And then Smash Bros sells a ton. It's like, wow, that's really impressive.
Yeah, they just nailed, I think, that need, that on-the-go gaming that people want right now.
Yes.
And it's affordable. It's a really fun console to collect for. They've done a great job, albeit sometimes it gets kind of tired, but with a lot of bringing great Wii U titles over for people that didn't get a chance to play them over to the console.
Most people didn't.
So many collections, which are available on other things, but when it's not an overpowered game, a lot of times people are like, well, I want to get it on the Switch because then I can play it at home or on the go.
I mean, that's a lot of those third-party games. We've got it on the Switch because it's like, oh, if we go to conventions or if we go traveling, we can play it on the airplane. We can play it on the road. We can play it wherever we want. We can play it in bed.
Yeah.
Like, the Switch is, like, so good. And what's so wild is, like, the Switch, I mean, it's Nintendo. They've always kind of done this, is non-gamers are buying the console.
Yep.
Like, I remember during COVID, that's when, like, the Switch really blew up because people bought it for Animal Crossing.
Yep.
That's a game I've never really played, but that was massive. It was like all these people that aren't really gamers are playing Animal Crossing, and they're able to like visit each other's villages and like hang out virtually. And it's like, that's really freaking cool.
Yeah, and you know, I think a lot of people, well, I can do all that, you know, on my Steam Deck or whatever. But Nintendo makes it to where the casual, the hardcore, anybody can just grab it and go.
It makes sense. Like, it's just...
And I think the Switch Online thing is a pretty big deal. I think it's given people who maybe don't have, you know, collections and are freaks about video game collecting, just quick and easy turnkey access to retro games and just so much that you can access.
You got so much. You got NES, Super Nintendo, N64. You got the Genesis app. You can play Genesis games on your Nintendo Switch. That's so wild. And the online thing is still cheaper than than PlayStation and Xbox.
Yeah.
So it's like, you get all that. I mean, playing online is different with the Switch. Like, you gotta play like over Discord or a phone call because like their headset's weird, but you can get around it and it's cheaper and you get all these options. What they've been able to do and continue to do is so impressive.
Well, yeah, especially once, you know, the new Xbox and PS5 came out, it's so underpowered comparatively to those. I mean, it was the most underpowered against PS4 and Xbox One, so it's even more so now. And I think, a lot of people maybe that watch maybe us or other YouTubers or other gaming content, I think sometimes we forget how much ease of use matters on the commercial scene.
Yes, it does.
Not everybody's as hardcore as you are. Not everybody's as hardcore about, well, I can run all these ROMs on my phone or however. Yes, that's all true. But I just don't know that the average Joe is doing that.
Yeah, most casual gamers aren't doing that.
And Nintendo makes it just so damn simple.
Nintendo reminds me a lot of Apple. Like, I have an iPhone and I love Apple, but it's like they make things that just make sense. Mm-hmm. Anybody can just fire it up and be like, oh, this is here, this is here. Nintendo is so, like, you could buy a Switch and have never played video games in your life and be able to figure it out. Like, they made it just simple, but not, like, dumb simple. Like, it just made sense. So even, like, hardcore gamers still... They don't feel like it's too easy.
Yeah.
It's a perfect blend of just everybody together.
I work with a guy that, you wouldn't, look at and think he's a gamer, right? I don't know whatever that means. I mean, gamers come in all shapes and sizes, but he hadn't played a Nintendo console since the Nintendo 64.
Damn, okay.
And he bought a Switch because of Tears of the Kingdom.
Yes, because the Tears hype.
And that's the only game he had. He played it start to finish, was obsessed with the freaking game. I don't know if he's got any games since, but that's all he had at the time, and was just grinding on it. I think that a lot of people got back into Nintendo because of the Nintendo Switch.
Dude, I think so, and I think Tears is another big example. I mean, Breath of the Wild, when that came out, it was a Wii U game, but then that really helped the initial sales of the Switch.
Yep.
But then when Tears came out, I remember where I was working when that came out. It was everywhere. People were talking about it. People were like, have you played it? Have you done this? Oh my God, videos on the internet were blowing up.
Yeah.
It was insane. People were buying it, like you said, just for that one game.
Yep.
That's so wild. I mean, Tears is phenomenal. But on the other side of the coin, people are buying PS5s to play Madden.
Yeah.
And it's like, you're going to have to buy that again and again and again and again and again.
Yep.
And it's like, you're playing Tears for hours.
Yeah,
and it's way different.
It's fascinating that what is the driver for every other console, pretty much from a sales perspective for the games. Nintendo's just like, hey, we'll do our own thing.
Yeah.
It speaks to how awesome it is and the quality of the games that Nintendo makes. I mean, Odyssey, there's been some clunkers for sure.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
We've griped about, like, God, for a long time, it kind of felt like, God, everything they're releasing is a Wii U game. We already kind of been there, done that. We've played those games. But it's still really cool to have it all in one place.
It still is really cool, and we love the Wii U. We've talked about it a ton on the channel, but it is super nice to have those Wii U games on the Switch. You can play it on the go, and then most of the time it includes all the updates and DLC and like extra content too. So, and it was a failed console, so for the most part, people didn't play those. So now it's like new games plus. It's just so good.
I want to talk about the other hurdle that I felt like the console overcame. Is the pack-in controllers suck ass.
Yeah, the Joy-Cons are terrible.
They're horrible. But it didn't matter.
No.
They just kept selling units.
That's what's so wild.
Yeah.
The Joy-Cons are so notorious for breaking or sticks, or they just feel like they're going to break. And people are like, well, I'll just buy another one. Yeah. I'll just buy it. Like, it's just like, those are like $80 a pop.
Hori Split Pad was the saving grace for that whole situation. But man, I hope the Switch 2 can deliver, because the original Switch, I think we're going to look back at this time years and years and years from now and be like, that was a really cool time to be a Nintendo fan.
Yeah, and because it's all cartridge based, some of the games or most of the games are all on the cartridge. Obviously, that doesn't include updates and stuff, but longevity and collectability, you'll still be able to play your Switch, in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, whatever, because it's all there. Well, and the games are simple enough where you don't need that stuff.
It's going to be an interesting collector standpoint for what's going to happen with the Switch, because I know the PS4 and Xbox One will fall into this in a way, but I feel like Nintendo is always the most collectible stuff.
Yep.
And this is in my mind, I'm not 100% accurate in saying this, but I'm relatively close. You'll get what I'm saying. This was kind of the first major era that, like, your limited run games, your strictly limited print type of stuff was in full swing.
Yep.
And I just wonder what's going to happen with that stuff over time. There was obviously, in prior generations, there's been some, limited run PS3 games, Wii U games, etc. But there were games that had just a smaller print run from the big companies.
Yeah.
But never just this curated, this is how many pre-sold, this is what's going out the door.
And they're still doing it for the Switch.
Yeah.
Like, dude, there are so many collectors they collect those types of things because it's rare and it's all this stuff. But that's going to be so wild because those things go up in price because it was such a limited run.
Yeah.
So like in 10 years, you're going to be like, oh my God, you have this sealed? Wow, that's awesome.
I mean, there's already Switch games north of 200, 300. I mean, it's crazy when you look at it. It's like, it's still out, guys.
Yeah, but that's wild.
So what's going to happen when... I mean, shit, the Mario All-Stars that came out...
Oh, yeah.
Force limited deal by Nintendo, which is kind of weird. I don't know why they did that. I digress, but that game's like $100 now, I think, for like a new copy. It's like, what's going to happen to this freaking thing?
It's gonna go nuts. And I
don't know.
PS2 is one of my favorite consoles of all time. It's amazing that it is the #1 selling console of all time. But I will not be shocked because this will happen. The Switch is gonna outsell it. I think it's like 10 million units short or less than that of outselling it, and it's still in production. It's still making it. Obviously, the Switch 2 is coming out later this year, I think, or they released a trailer. I don't know the exact date on it, but I'm sure they're going to still be making Switches and Switch games when the Switch 2 is out because it's doing so well.
Yeah.
It's going to go up there, and then it's just so fascinating. And I play my Switch all the time. It is so fun. You got to get a pro controller if you really want a game. But it's great. And then every time I go on the road, even if I don't think I'm going to have time to game, I bring it with.
Yep.
Just in case. Because it's like, it's awesome.
Knock out a few levels of Cuphead while you're driving in the car.
Oh,
pretty amazing
fantastic.
stuff. Yeah. I just wanted to just sit down and shoot the breeze about the console. Just our thoughts. It's amazing. Obviously, we can nitpick the little stuff.
Yeah.
But what a good run. While it's on its, last swan song years, it's on its last ride into the sunset, off into the sunset. Let's celebrate this freaking show pony. And remember how awesome the freaking Nintendo Switch is.
It's so amazing. And, I mean, Nintendo Switch 2 is probably going to be freaking great. And I can't wait. The Switch 2 is going to be awesome.
It's going to be a day one purchase. If we can freaking find one.
Yeah, if we can get one.
Scalpers be damned. But anyway, in the comment section below, what are some of your favorite things about the Nintendo Switch? Were you on the hype train? Do you think it deserves all the success it has? Because these two fellas do right here. Let's get amped up for the Switch 2, but not forget of how great the Nintendo Switch is. We appreciate you tuning in, subscribing to the channel. We'll catch you on the next episode of the one and only Gaming Off the Grid. P.S. We're both under the weather. Thanks for sticking around and dealing with the voice situation.
Yeah.
Later.